How do you build the impossible? Do you begin with a single, obsessive genius? A powerful, ambitious family? A mountain of gold? Or a stroke of artistic brilliance? In 15th century Florence, it took all of them. This is the story of how one city, fueled by money, rivalry, and genius, built a masterpiece that gave birth to our modern world. Echoes of Genius, Florence and the Renaissance. Chapter 1. The Impossible Challenge. In the early 15th century, Florence was a city of soaring ambitia, wealthy republic, powerhouse of banking and trade, ready to build a monument to its own glory. But for decades, its great cathedral, the Santa Maria del Fiore, stood incomplete, with a gaping wound open to the sky. A hole so massive, it was the shame of the city. The challenge was considered impossible. The dome required was wider than any that had been built for over 1,000 years, and the techniques to build it had been lost to time. But while the city's leaders saw an unsolvable problem, one man saw only a magnificent, career-defining opportunity. Filippo Brunelleschi, not a traditional architect, but a goldsmith, a clockmaker, and a fiery, obsessive engineering genius. His talent was matched only by his ambition constantly challenged by his more popular and politically savvy rival, the celebrated artist Lorenzo Ghiberti. In 1418, the city announced a grand competition, offering a fortune and eternal fame to any man who could devise a way to finally build their dome. Architects from all over Europe presented their plans, but they all relied on the same old medieval solution: ugly, expensive internal scaffolding or massive external buttresses. Brunelleschi came before the judges with a radical proposal. But when they asked for the details of how his dome would stand, he refused, terrified his rivals would steal his secrets. The judges were insulted. They called him a buffoon and a babbler and had him physically thrown out of the assembly. Humiliated but not defeated, Brunelleschi, a master of theatrical gestures, devised a public test of wit for his mocking rivals. He presented them with a simple challenge: make an egg stand upright on a slab of marble. They all tried, and they all declared it impossible. Brunelleschi simply took the egg, cracked its base against the marble, and it stood perfectly. His point was clear: great feats are only considered impossible before a genius shows you the way, and his secret was revolutionary. A magnificent double-shelled dome, built with interlocking bricks in a herringbone pattern that would support itself as it grew. He had not only designed the dome, but also the very machines to build it. Massive, ox-powered hoists with a reversing gear, an invention unlike anything seen since ancient Rome. His audacious, visionary plans caught the eye of the most powerful man in Florence, Cosimo de' Medici, the head of a banking dynasty who knew the value of a high-risk, high-reward investment. With no other viable options, the city fathers reluctantly awarded the commission to Brunelleschi, but with a bitter condition: he would have to share the title and the glory of chief architect with his hated rival Lorenzo Ghiberti. And so, in the year 1420, after decades of shame, the great work finally began. The first stones were laid for what would become the greatest architectural feat of the Renaissance. For the people of Florence, it was a symbol of new hope. For Filippo Brunelleschi, it was the beginning of an impossible challenge that would consume the rest of his life. Chapter 2. The Medici's Gamble. But genius alone does not build monuments. It requires a different kind of power. And in 15th century Florence, that power was not inherited by blood, but earned with gold. The city was the financial capital of the world, dominated by one family whose banking empire stretched across all of Europe, the Medici. At its head was Cosimo de' Medici, not a prince, but a banker. A shrewd, quiet, and calculating man who understood that money could buy anything, even a place in history. The church officially considered their profession a sin. Usury, the lending of money for interest, was said to be a path to eternal damnation. And so, Cosimo spent a fortune on public art and architecture, not just for glory, but for salvation. It was a way to launder his money, and perhaps his soul, in the eyes of God. He ruled Florence from the shadows, a godfather of the Renaissance, controlling the city's politics through a vast and complex network of debts and favors. But his most visible and ambitious project, the Great Dome, was in trouble. The forced partnership between the brilliant Brunelleschi and his popular rival, Ghiberti, had descended into open conflict. Ghiberti, the better politician, used his connections within the city's guilds to undermine Brunelleschi at every turn, attempting to steal the glory for himself. Frustrated and blocked at every step, Brunelleschi turned to the one man whose power was absolute, his patron, Cosimo de' Medici. Cosimo listened. He knew that Ghiberti was a fine artist, but only Brunelleschi possessed the unique engineering genius to actually finish the dome. A quiet decision was made. With his patron's secret support, Brunelleschi devised a brilliant piece of public theater. He feigned a serious illness, leaving his incompetent rival in sole command of the project. The trap worked perfectly. Without Brunelleschi's daily guidance, Ghiberti was completely lost. The massive construction site ground to a halt. He quickly became a laughingstock. The city fathers, furious at the delays, saw the truth for themselves. Ghiberti was not the man for the job. Brunelleschi returned, his point proven. He was granted what he had always wanted: sole, undisputed authority over the project. The dome was now his, and his alone. Unleashed from his rival, his true genius flourished. His revolutionary hoisting machines, powered by oxen, began lifting massive sandstone beams hundreds of feet into the air. His self-reinforcing herringbone brick pattern allowed the dome to curve inwards and upwards, supporting its own immense weight without the need for a single piece of internal scaffolding. He was not just a great architect, but a brilliant manager, inventing new safety measures and even providing diluted wine to his workers to maintain their morale and energy. And his patron watched with deep satisfaction. The dome was more than a gift to God. It was a towering symbol of Medici power, rising higher than any family's tower in Florence. The Medici's money fueled a citywide explosion of creativity, funding the revolutionary work of sculptors like Donatello and painters like Fra Angelico, creating an entire ecosystem of genius. The dome was becoming the centerpiece of a new golden age, an age paid for with gold, and forever marked with the crest of the Medici. Their great gamble was reshaping the world. Chapter 3: Secrets of the Dome. Brunelleschi's solution to building a dome so large and light was breathtakingly simple and utterly revolutionary. He would build not one dome, but two. An inner, thicker shell would provide the structural integrity, and to prevent the curving walls from collapsing, he resurrected an ancient Roman technique, the herringbone brick pattern, which locked the bricks together into a single, solid mass. For 16 years, masons worked hundreds of feet in the air, laying over 4 million bricks with incredible precision, their lives depending on the genius of this interlocking design. Brunelleschi himself was a constant, demanding presence on the site. He personally oversaw every detail, trusting no one but himself to execute his singular vision. But even this was not enough. To counteract the immense outward pressure that threatened to tear the dome apart, what engineers call hoop stress, he designed a series of massive tension rings, great chains of sandstone and iron, embedded invisibly within the dome's walls like the hoops of a giant barrel. These hidden chains would act as a muscular corset, strangling the dome and preventing it from ever spreading outwards under its own colossal weight. And most miraculously of all, he did it without traditional scaffolding. The entire structure supported itself as it grew. The work platform built out from the dome's own walls, climbing higher and higher into the sky. To the people of Florence below, it must have looked like pure sorcery, a colossal brick masterpiece, hanging in the sky with no visible means of support. Year after year, through the heat of summer and the snow of winter, the dome slowly, patiently spiraled towards the heavens. A testament to long-term vision and tireless effort. The project consumed him. The once fiery goldsmith was now a weary old man. His life's energy and genius poured into the bricks and mortar of his masterpiece. Then, in 1436, the final ring of bricks was laid. The great hole that had been the shame of Florence for over a century was finally, triumphantly, closed. The dome was built, but one final critical challenge remained: how to cap the open oculus at its peak to lock the entire structure into place. A new competition was announced to design the heavy marble lantern that would crown the dome. It was one last chance for glory and one last battle for Brunelleschi. His old rival, Lorenzo Ghiberti, submitted a design. But the world had changed. Brunelleschi was no longer the outcast babbler. He was now the celebrated master of Florence. His design for the lantern was not only more beautiful, but structurally superior. This time, the judges listened in awe. The rivalry that had defined a generation of Florentine art was finally over. Ghiberti walked away, defeated. Filippo Brunelleschi stood alone as the undisputed master, using another of his custom-built cranes. The massive pieces of the lantern were hoisted to the very top of the dome, a final display of his engineering dominance. On the day of the cathedral's consecration, the Pope himself blessed the great work. The music of a grand choir filled the vast new space for the very first time. It was done. The impossible had been made real. Filippo Brunelleschi had given his city its soul and had given the world a new vision of what was humanly possible. Chapter 4. A City Reborn. Brunelleschi's dome was more than a roof. It became the heart of Florence. A new sun around which the entire city revolved, and a daily, towering reminder that the impossible could be achieved. The man who had fought for his vision his entire life could now, in his final years, watch his city gaze upon his masterpiece with unrestrained awe. Upon his death, Filippo Brunelleschi was given the ultimate honor. He was laid to rest in the crypt of the great cathedral he had built, forever a part of his own creation. But his true legacy was not in stone, but in the minds of the next generation. The dome ignited a fire of ambition in Florence, inspiring a new wave of artists to break their own limits. In the bustling workshops of the city, a new kind of universal genius emerged. A young apprentice named Leonardo da Vinci, whose boundless curiosity would seek to understand everything. He was not just a painter, but a scientist, an engineer, and a student of human anatomy. His notebooks revealed a mind that saw no boundaries between art and science. And this new wave of genius was funded by a new Medici, Lorenzo, known as the Magnificent, a poet and a diplomat who sponsored the greatest talents of the age. It was Lorenzo who discovered another, very different kind of prodigy. A young, intense sculptor of immense power and almost divine skill. Michelangelo Buonarroti. While Leonardo observed the world with cool scientific curiosity, Michelangelo attacked it with a divine, spiritual fury, wrestling his angels from stone. The two titans, Leonardo and Michelangelo, represented the two poles of the High Renaissance: elegant scientific observation and passionate spiritual creation. But this golden age was fragile. A backlash of religious extremism, led by the fanatics of Savonarola, sought to extinguish the light of the Renaissance in a great bonfire of the vanities. For a time, darkness returned. The Medici were exiled, and the future of Florence's creative soul hung in the balance. But the echo of genius, once released, could not be contained. In Milan, Leonardo created one of the most powerful psychological paintings in all of human history. And, in Rome, Michelangelo sculpted a vision of divine sorrow and beauty that would stun the world and establish him as a master. The spirit of Florence had escaped its walls, igniting the High Renaissance across Italy and, eventually, all of Europe. When the Republic was restored in Florence, it needed a new symbol of its strength. It came in the form of Michelangelo's David, the perfect man, a testament to defiant perfection. It was an age of unequaled masterpieces, culminating in the world's most famous and most mysterious portrait. 600 years later, the awe remains. The world still makes the pilgrimage to Florence to stand in the shadow of this collective genius. It was a singular moment in time. It's an explosion of creativity. Brunelleschi, Donatello, Botticelli, Leonardo, Michelangelo, all born from the same remarkable crucible. A golden age, sparked by the wealth of a single family and crowned by an impossible dome, creating an echo of genius that would never fade.